What if everything you thought about protecting your family was actually missing the real danger?
A quarter of females who go to college are going to be sexually assaulted before they leave college. Somewhere between 40 and 50%, 40 to 44% of females in the United States, regardless of whether they go to college or not, are going to be sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
Our guest, Ross Hick, has spent 17 years in the shadows monitoring the most dangerous criminals, gang members, sex offenders, and violent felons. Over 10,000 hours of interviews and surveillance have revealed chilling truths that most people have never heard. The real threat? It's often hiding in plain sight, closer than you'd ever imagine.
Who do you think the number one offender that I supervise is? Who do you, the relationship to the victim, the number one person who victimizes on my case?
Family member. Is it?
Stepdad.
Stepdad?
Number two, biological father.
Oh, gosh. So how do you truly protect your family? And what critical signs are you missing? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear today could change everything you think you know about protecting your family.
To steal a quote from a colleague of mine, people don't change unless they have to. And forcing yourself to have to is a very, very powerful skill if you can learn it, but most people don't.
You know, I think at the end of the day, what you're talking about is something that I really believe in, and it's part of the reason why I started this show to begin with, and that is personal responsibility. If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple iTunes, and anywhere else that you can see me or hear my voice. If you don't want to miss another episode of Defenders Live, you can join our free community at defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. Lastly, if you're looking for exceptional firearms or self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at their calendar to see what training is coming to you this year. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson. Ross Hick is a probation surveillance officer, behavioral monitoring analyst, and firearms instructor on the Southwest border with 17 years of experience monitoring high-risk convicted felons in the community. He has extensive field experience working specialized caseloads, including gangs, domestic violence, seriously mental ill, and sex offenders. He's also a field training officer, department armorer, and instructor in multiple disciplines, such as taser and use of force. Additionally, Ross has taught lawfully armed citizens critical self-defense skills in his community as an NRA active response training and range master certified instructor, and as a citizens defense research cadre member. We have a lot to get into, so let's get to it. Let's welcome Ross Hick onto the show. Hey, Ross.
Hey, how you doing?
Well, tonight's subject is kind of a somber subject. I know that there's a lot of information that you have that you want people to know. And so I think we should just get right to it. First off, I want to thank you for what you do, because you have really put yourself on the line, so to speak, in service to other people. The profession that you have chosen, I can only imagine how hard that must be on a person. And I appreciate that the information that you know you're using for the good of others. And so I just want to acknowledge that right out of the gate.
Thank you. Yeah, I joke about it at times that I'm trying to turn vicarious trauma into something useful for the community, because I get to live with that for the rest of my life, and it would be make me feel a little better in retirement, I think, someday, to know that I've helped mitigate that, and ideally maybe even eliminate the need for my position entirely. That would actually make me kind of happy if that ever happened. But yeah,
that would be ideal, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with, if you're open to it, let's start with the biggest misconceptions you think the public has about sex offenses and real threats that people face. If we could start there, that might be a good, and if there's any, background information that I missed that people might need to know.
Absolutely. Just some stats kind of right off the top. In the United States, we're looking at close to 1 million, about 750,000 sex offenders, known registered sex offenders. And of those, only about a third are actually supervised actively. So about 250,000. And so lots, right? But the bigger problem is the unknown sex offenders, right? Lots of research to show that once a sex offender is caught, and monitored, generally speaking, they have an incredibly low recidivism rate while they're being monitored. In fact, they're the only thing lower out of all violent crime is murder. That said, sex offenders aren't cured, right? The best we do is manage it. And so I throw those numbers out there to show that, close to 1 million is a big number, but that's just what we know. And the bigger problem are the unknowns. Mm-hmm. And the estimates are kind of wild, but some estimates put that at, for every sex offender we know of, there's probably 3 we don't. And in my experience, I would say that's probably pretty accurate. So I throw that out there because a lot of people focus on the website in every state. Usually it's a state police running it that has the sex offender. You put your address in and you can see where everybody lives around you, and you see little pictures and you go, haha, that guy lives down the street or 2 blocks away. I'm going to skip that house on Halloween. Absolutely. I'm going to watch out for that person. And yes, you should, because occasionally they do become an issue. But that complacency involved in assuming that you know where the danger lies is why I still have a job, frankly. It's the ones we don't know about that end up on my caseload at some point. And on that note, people tend to focus on the van pulling up at the the playground and opening the door, snatching a kid, or a kid getting snatched at the mall. And that stuff does happen. And I don't want to give the impression that that's not an important thing, but it's a fraction of the whole, right? It's a tiny, tiny percentage, less than 1% of the problem. Based on anyone's statistics you look at, it varies from 0.3 to 0.5%.
So is there something more likely to happen than that then? What would that be?
Yeah. So depending on what stats you look at, a quarter of females who go to college are going to be sexually assaulted before they leave college. Somewhere between 40 and 50%, 40 to 44% of females in the United States, regardless of whether they go to college or not, are going to be sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
40%.
Close to half. Close to half. And that's just females, right? We're not even talking about kids yet. But the point being, that's a huge problem, as you can see. You know someone. If it hasn't happened to you, I guarantee someone in your life it has happened to or will happen to in their lifetime. And when we're focusing on the fractions of a percent that feel good, because that's an easy problem, right? If the van pulls up at the playground and someone tries to physically abduct the kid, I don't think I have to think very hard about what I'm going to do about that problem, right? And no one listening to this should have to think too hard about that. But what I get a lot from people when I tell them what job I do and who I work with is a conversation-ending comment, which is, well, I just shoot him in the head. If that ever happened to my kid, I would just shoot him. And then I know I might go to jail. I might have legal problems depending on the circumstances, but I don't care. I'm just going to shoot them and that will solve the problem, right? And what that person is always missing when they say that is that, who do you think the number one offender that I supervise is? Who do you, the relationship to the victim, the number one person who victimizes on my case?
Family member.
Uh-huh.
I already knew the answer though.
Do you have a guess as to who?
Who? In the family?
Yeah, which family member?
I would imagine it be a male instead of a female.
Almost always. There are female sex offenders, but super rare. Okay. You don't have to answer. I was just throwing that out there.
I don't want to say the dad, but I wonder. Is it?
Stepdad.
Stepdad?
Biological father.
Oh, gosh.
And so when we say things like, I just shoot him in the head, what you're saying is, your only plan to deal with this, if it ever happens to you or a family member, is to shoot someone that you love, or and then it goes on down from there. But it's
well, that's implying they think the person is going to be a stranger, probably. Right.
And that's the whole problem and that's what I'm trying to get across to people, is that it's so rarely a stranger that if your only plan is violence or physical intervention, okay. But I can tell you that's not going to be the problem. And what it is usually is a family member in your household or invited into your household or something like that. And when that happens, the number one reaction I get that I see is people don't want to believe it, because who would?
Right.
They immediately tell the victim, especially if they're a child, oh, you must have been mistaken. Maybe you were mistaken. Maybe you misunderstood what was happening.
That's really common.
Super common. It's like in every case.
Really?
And what does that Yeah, almost every case. Now, what do you think that does to the victim?
Right.
They're already having those same thoughts of, I can't believe this happened to me. I can't believe this person I love and trusted has done this to me. And now I'm in this.
Nobody believes
now
me.
The person I finally worked up the courage to tell is telling me that I was mistaken, or maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I did misunderstand, especially with kids. Very easy to influence them into that track and that mindset. And so what do you think the average time from when the event occurred to when it was actually reported to law enforcement was for my cases? How long did it take? Yeah,
Years.
a year and a half. And that's the average. So we're talking, some of them was 3, 5, 10 years. Super, super common. And so that's why it's frustrating for me when some allegation comes out and I see people say, well, they're saying this thing happened 3 years ago. Why didn't they tell someone? I bet they did. I almost guarantee they told someone, and that person said, oh man, you can't make that public. That's going to come back on you, or maybe you were mistaken, or maybe you misunderstood.
Or they would never do that, or...
And so then they buried it for years.
Man, this
super common.
Psychological implications here are just... And okay, could I just say something real quick?
Sure.
I am imagining this to be... I'm imagining this to turn into a generational cycle is what I'm imagining. I don't know if that's actually true of what happens, but if a child goes through something like that, and all the things you're saying happen the way they happen, is the probability of them actually in later in life becoming a perpetrator because of the trauma they have gone through more probable?
Yeah. Sorry, my inverter is going to make a lot of noise here.
Sounds like
so
a
just for a
vacuum
second,
just started.
Apologies. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
It's a fan. It's a
You're all
cooling
good.
fan.
It's
sorry.
all good. It doesn't.
My battery will die, so we'll just give it a second. Is that going to be really bad audio in the background, or is it not? Okay, as long as you can hear me and kind of tune it out. I apologize. Okay. Well, I'll wait for the edit here for you. So
I think we should keep it in, Ross. We should keep it in.
Okay. Totally. Yeah. This is behind the scenes.
Real life.
Great.
This is real life.
So as far as generational trauma goes, it's poorly understood in that no one knows the exact route that takes. There's a lot of theories behind it.
Yeah.
And I have my own, right? That again, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not, I've turned into one, but I'm not a trained psychologist. And so these are just my opinions. But to give you one example, right? From domestic violence that I work with in the past, as a domestic violence victim, what I see a lot of people do is start to learn that they have to manage the mood of the other person or they get hurt. Now, can they really? Probably not, but they try because it's all they got. So they will try to make the person happy, make the person calm, keep them happy whenever they can, manage that. And that creates a person, in my experience, who is hyper focused on the people around them and keeping them happy and frankly manipulating them in a way, trying to manipulate their mood for a positive end. But then what do you think happens when that person has kids or down the line? So that's their tactic for communication, is being hyper vigilant, jumping on every bit of behavior and controlling or to a subconscious level. And I'm not trying to victim blame.
That's how they survive.
Right. That's how it's a survival mechanism. It's absolutely necessary in their minds. But it's miserable to be around because then that person, they don't even know they're doing it, but they will subconsciously. And I've had it happen to me where in the domestic violence field, it's hard to say, but what we often say is that the victims, if they're involved still, and they almost always are, they'll come out of they'll show up eventually at the offender's house or something. Even if they have a restraining order, they'll show up. They are just as dangerous to a third party in a lot of circumstances as the offender because they're unpredictable. One moment they'll be on your side, texting saying, "Hey, I need you to, he's texting me. He's not supposed to be having contact. I need you to go arrest him. I need you to take him to jail." Okay, so Ross suits up and goes over there and starts to arrest the guy. But as you show up, the guy is ready for me and is fights and everything. So we go to jail and I get his phone as part of the process, and I look on his phone arresting him, and there's text messages from the person who texted me right afterwards, texting him and saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. I told Ross, what was going on? He's on his way there right now, risking my
Wow.
life, right? Super common.
Wow.
And so I used to take it very personally when I started out. And now I go, well, what would I do in those circumstances, right? I try to control everything, play all sides to get myself safe, to keep myself safe, second guess myself. And so you see a lot of the same stuff in sex offenders where victims, right? Where that just one aspect, right, is that management of people around you and that control.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts to cause generational issues because then what do the kids learn? Well, the kids learn that's how adults are. They just try to control them all the time. And kids rebel and kids do silly things when that happens to them. And now they have a criminal record and repeat.
Right.
And
Right.
there's a lot more to it, but yeah, absolutely generational. And it's super, super common. And it's one thing we have to bring up in treatment, because in treatment, sex offenders will commonly introduce that as an excuse. Oh, this happened to me when I was a kid. And we go, yes, but that's, if all you do in life is tell people why you're doing things without ever actually doing any work to change them, that's not okay. That's a meaningless, you're trying to get an advantage, you're trying to hurt people and get away with it.
Yeah.
So a big lesson I would say to people is, if someone in your life ends up catching charges for something like this, a sex offense, DV, whatever it is, and they tell you, here's the reason why: I had a bad relationship with my father, I was abused as a kid, I grew up in this neighborhood, whatever it is, 100% they're probably right that had some component. But my question is always then, okay, what are you doing about it? And if they don't have an answer to that, oh, well, I did some stuff in the past, or I'm working on it, just vague answers, I'm trying harder. That's not how people change, is just trying harder. You know that, right? It's going to therapy, it's building a routine, it's having people help you, outside sources looking at you and having that openness that they can call you when they see a problem and call you on it. And so that is another thing that comes up a lot, even in our industry, where someone will make a mistake and there will be an allegation, and then a year later they're back and they say, I'm changed. And my question is always, okay, what did you do? And if their only answer is, I just tried harder, I'm not going to do it this time.
Yeah.
The person who monitors sex offenders and abusers and violent felons in me goes, maybe, probably not. It's a long answer, but yeah, it is absolutely generational. And to change that takes incredible effort. To steal a quote from a colleague of mine, people don't change unless they have to. And forcing yourself to have to is a very, very powerful skill if you can learn it, but most people don't.
I think at the end of the day, what you're talking about is something that I really believe in, and it's part of the reason why I started this show to begin with, and that is personal responsibility. And for me, that has been probably the only way that I've been able to grow in ways that I've grown as I look back on it over the last few years, and having accountability and responsibility for myself, regardless of whatever I came from or the conditions or circumstances. And it's not a flip of the switch kind of a thing. That's why it's so hard, Ross. I think it's a very long journey. It's a process, and a person, I believe, has to want it really bad, and has to be a willing participant and do really, hard things, and look at things that perhaps are maybe some of the most scary places of themselves and their past and everything else. And so, have you met people who have actually changed that generational curse, so to speak? Do you even know a person that has done that? And what kind of things did you observe in that person?
Yes. And I would say, with the caveat that, again, it's super rare. So I don't want to depress everybody, but out of thousands and thousands of cases, we're talking like a handful.
Yeah.
And it depends on the time period you look at, right? If we're talking about changing while they're being monitored and I'm in their life and all these, the court's watching them, sure, that number is much higher. But if you look at their lifetime, it starts to get really depressing, and you start to see people coming back on average about every 7 years, getting caught again on that cycle. And oftentimes it's not a positive trend, right? It's trending more serious. The times that I have seen people fundamentally change okay, again, I don't want to depress everybody, but one of my star cases, my example case for years on the violent side, when I was just doing violent offenders, but not sex offenders. So ag assault, armed robbery, murder, negligent homicide, stuff like that, was a guy who got in a motorcycle accident and got brain damage and changed his whole personality overnight. And he was changed overnight. Everybody else was, especially for the violent side, at best, if they lived long enough, and by that point they'd all been shot in a drug deal or by the cops or they all had bullet scars all over. These guys are broken down people who can barely walk, a lot of them. If they made it into their 30s, like their mid to late 30s, that was when, as we all know, your body starts to slow down. You're not young anymore. You start to feel it every day. And that was what kicked them, not anything else, not catching charges and going to prison for 70. They don't like that, right? But that's just cost of business to a lot of these guys. And so that was what finally got them to go, huh. And what it was to a person when you talk to them, especially my drug dealers, is they said, man, you know what? I realize I can't keep doing this because the young guys are going to kill me. Like I can't do this forever. I got to have an alternative. And now you got a guy in his mid to late 30s who's never had, not for long, a legitimate job. He's got a huge criminal history. He's got all sorts of stuff, fines and fees he owes, all these things over his head. Probably doesn't have a driver's license anymore. It's valid. And he's starting from square one at a local fast food restaurant, trying to pay that stuff off. And he knows he's not ever gonna retire, right? He's never gonna get. And so there's that. You'll get him kind of on a track for a little while. And then one day, a year or 2 years down the road, because I supervise people for obviously pretty serious crimes. And so I'm in these guys' lives for years and years and years, some of them life, especially the sex offenders, lifetime. And so I get to see those long-term trends that a lot of people in law enforcement and the justice system don't. And so 3 years down the road, one day you'll catch the guy dealing drugs again or something on the side, and he doesn't want to, but at the end of the day, that's the only way he can pay his bills that weekend, because he's used to getting up and making a couple grand overnight if he needs to, if he needs money tomorrow. He's not used to waiting 2 weeks and having taxes taken out. And so in a way, rightfully so, that guy looks at you when you're telling him, hey, you got to get a job and taxes and you only get paid every 2 weeks. Thinks you're crazy. He's like, you guys actually do that?
Yeah.
Why? Like, I can make $3 grand tomorrow, and yeah, I might die, but usually I don't. And I'm good and I make $3 grand. And I'm like, how do you convince that guy that your way is better?
Right.
Not for long. And so all that is to say, depressingly, in my experience, people can change. It's super rare. And if they do change, it's usually very, very short term. And then something will kind of kick them back again down the road, especially for drug abuse and stuff like that. It's a cycle. And you can't really change them. Like I can't throw enough prison and enough fines and enough stuff at people to change their minds, not for long, right? Humans are incredibly adaptable at forgetting pain. Otherwise, nobody would have more than one kid, from what I've heard, right? Yeah. I've been tased 7 times.
Wow.
In medical trials and other stuff I volunteered for as an instructor. Why? Because I forgot how awful it was every time. Then I went and did it again and went, wow, why did I do that? You're incredibly good at forgetting pain over time, or putting it in a box and and then going back to that. And so I say that because it's no different for criminals. And so you might get them motivated for a minute and then they go right back again. And especially if it's a sex offense again, it's a sexual attraction in a lot of ways, and control and other stuff. There's a lot of motivations, and part of it is not, I should mention here, a lot of people who aren't in this, who don't work with sex offenders directly, just assume a sex offender is a sex offender. Not at all true. Like, there are broad similarities, but when we get them into treatment, one of the first things we have to figure out is why were they attracted to a specific victim? Some people victimize 8-year-old girls. That's it. Some people, doesn't matter whether it's a boy or girl. Some people, age doesn't matter. It's more about control. And so fixing that problem is getting in depth. But I bring that up because, if I told any of the viewers, hey, you know what? Just don't have sex for the rest of your life. Don't think about it. Don't want it. Just go to your job every day. And I think everybody listening would be like, yeah, that's pretty harsh. I don't know that I can do that. That's what essentially that's what we're asking sex offenders to do for the rest of their life, is who they are attracted to. Just don't do that, because it's not going to change. I hate to tell you, down the road, the best we can do is management. The best we can do is get to a place where that person recognizes they have this problem and will for the rest of their life, and it's not going away. And then we build layers, right, of protection, of having people monitoring them, having them realize they need to tell people when they're having issues or when they're seeing this stuff. And that's the best we can do. And again, down the road, there's no guarantees, especially once they're not monitored anymore. It's high likelihood of recidivism.
I'm just wondering, like, I'm thinking about, you know, the criminals that you were talking about, like the guy that was dealing drugs, and now you're talking about sex offenders. It's making me think about motivations, about motives, about the real reason people operate the way that they do. And the only thing that popped up in my mind, as far as like you're saying, you know, they can be motivated for a while to be on the right track, but at the end of the day, most of them just revert back. And I'm just thinking to myself, I wonder if that's because the purpose they see in their own life isn't like a purpose that I look at in my life. Like, I feel like maybe their purpose was more just surviving life, instead of having any kind of fulfillment or joy or anything like that. It is like, that's not even on their radar. All they can care about are the needs that they have in this moment, and how do I take care of it right now? Whatever that is, whether you're a sex offender and you think your need is whatever, control, or whatever motivates them. I have no idea. I'm sure I don't even want to know. But then, you know, then the other side of it, like, you know, the criminals, drug dealers, whatever, at the end of the day, it's just surviving that moment. And it's all in the moment of attaining the thing that they want, isn't it? I mean,
that's not.
There's no like long-term goal here. They're not talking about spiritual fulfillment or anything like that. I mean, this is nitty gritty, like surviving every day, right? Yep.
Yeah. So, yes, and to give you kind of so if you grow up in the hood where you see, you know, my average violent offender, dad's dead or in prison, brothers in a gang are dead. Mom has a heroin problem or something. You know, like, this is not their neighbors. This is in their lives 24/7. It's a reality. And you're right. It becomes a survival mechanism to get through the next 24, 72 hours at most. And so, their impulse control is a problem, because you get that guy out and he's never thought more than 72 hours ahead, because that's as far as he can think to survive. Right. And then you tell that guy, hey, you're on this caseload for 3 years and you got to pay this back and you got to do all these things and complete these programs that are 6 months long. And again, looks at you like you're crazy because he's never had to do it in his life. And that is a serious challenge. I will also say that along with that impulse control, like money, you know, there are still similar motivations that we would recognize: money, wealth, power, security, things like that. But the really successful criminals that don't get caught for a very long time or ever are the ones who can plan a couple years ahead. And I know some of those who, through various aspects of life, I have seen who have never been caught and have put their money into a house and a retirement. Super, super rare. But they are the rare ones who can plan more than 72 hours ahead. And absolutely. It's very astute. And so that's another challenge with motivating folks to change in any way. And this is depressing for me to say, but I'm giving you the real answer, because a lot of our programs are focused on changing people, on working on that change. And again, it's possible short term. It's less possible long term, but it does happen. But most of the programs we have in the U.S. are short-sighted. They are punitive programs, right? Let's put someone in prison for 3 years. Well, okay, prison is for people we're scared of. Prison is for people who we need to go away. It doesn't change people, not for the better. People don't come out of prison and go, whatever they tell you, they don't come out of prison and go, my life has changed. They get worse, right? They learn how to be better criminals in prison. And so there are programs. One program I'm familiar with for like drug users, right? Drug dealers aren't supposed to get into it, but generally drug users who don't have violent felonies. There are programs in the U.S. to, instead of throwing that person in prison, try to get them off of the drug. And it is a long-term, years process. It's putting that person directly from incarceration, where they have to be sober. Really, it's just harder to get drugs and they're really expensive. So they're probably mostly sober, but more sober than they've ever been in their lives. But taking them out of incarceration directly to a 90-day inpatient intensive program where they're basically locked down and they have to stay sober. And then directly from that to intensive outpatient where, and this is going to irk a lot of people, we get them a job, right? But that meth addict doesn't have any teeth in their mouth. They don't have a car. They can't get a car. They can't get their driver's license back. They don't have the money to do it, and they can't get a job to get the money to do it. So endless cycle, right? And so there are programs where we will pay for that person to get a car, pay for that person to fix their teeth so they can actually get a job where the customers aren't screaming out the door. And people go, well, that's why are we paying those guys for screwing up? Well, you're not. You're paying to fix them because, unfortunately, if you don't, they're going to go right back again, and they're going to be your problem because they're going to be stealing your car. So you can pay for a new car and the insurance claim and everything else and be angry about it, or we can collectively give that person money. And it's not just money. We don't just throw money at them, right? These programs are here's $1,000 for this car. By the way, you get to show up in front of the judge every 2 weeks with all of the treatment providers, everybody, me, everyone in your life gets to show up. Your family, and we all sit there and talk about how you've been doing the last 2 weeks down to the finest detail. And if we gave you a car and you didn't get a job and you're screwing up and your boss is there saying, yeah, he showed up late 3 times, there's immediate consequences. We'll take that car back if we have to, but more importantly, what we're going to do is, hey, you're going to go spend the weekend in jail, or hey, here's an extra fine, or hey, here's all the extra stuff we do. And this is going to sound a lot like parenting.
It does.
It is. It's good parenting. And that's what we're doing for kids who never had good parents, frankly. Sorry, but who never had that role model in their lives for whatever reason. And I'm not blaming the parents all the time. Sometimes they're working 3 jobs trying to survive themselves, and this just happened. But if you don't want to do that, and I'm sure I hear it all the time, right? There's people who just say, nope, not my tax dollars. We're going to throw them in prison, throw away the key, or we're going to put them on an island somewhere. And I go, yeah, you can do that, right? Not legally, but we could change the law and we could do that tomorrow. But the problem we would end up with is the same, because it's not like we have a finite supply of felons. We keep making them. And unless we fix what's making them in the first place, you can't build an island big enough. And at some point, if we just locked them up and threw away the key, we're going to run out of room.
What is the success rate of that program? I'm wondering. Do you even know?
High. Far higher than any of the other programs out there. But when I say high, generally for what we do, anything over 50% is amazing. And that's depressing.
That's still way better than just them perpetually being behind bars and then being worse when they get out.
And it's an option, I should say. Like, even if these people are screened for these programs, they have to not have any violent felonies. They have to be the right person. And even at the end of that, they get a choice. They are told by their attorney and by the judge, hey, this program is available to you, but if you're not going to do it, or you're going to waste our time or whatever, prison's always an option as an alternative, and we can do that. And we hold that over their head, because if they screw up in the program, I'll arrest them and they'll go to prison tomorrow. They're getting a second chance,
essentially, is what's happening.
Yeah. And so I think, and again, a lot of people are going to balk at that kind of stuff. And I've had the same thing for sex offenders. Try to get money for sex offenders, tax dollars for sex offender stuff. No politician wants to make that their program. Nobody wants their money to go to sex offenders. And I get it. But when I have a sex offender who gets out of prison, and this is not a hypothetical for me, and I have to find him a place to live, and no one will rent that guy a place. Arsonists and sex offenders are impossible to find housing for, because nobody wants anything to do with them, rightfully so. So now it's a halfway house. Well, even halfway houses don't want them because it's too high a liability. And so there are, in my city, 2 halfway houses in the entire city, and it's not a small city, that will accept sex offenders. When their beds are full, I have a homeless sex offender sleeping in an alley somewhere. And I'm not kidding. I've had sex offenders out in the desert just living somewhere in a tent, because that's the only place they can live. And I show up and have to just hike. The directions are, hike into the desert somewhere. And sometimes they're on GPS monitors, sometimes they're not. But GPS doesn't tell me what they're doing, just tells me where they are. So point being, those are your alternatives when I tell people, and they say, I don't want my tax dollars to go to sex offender treatment or anything else. And I say, okay, I get it. But would you rather that guy be homeless in the alley behind your house? Because that's the alternative eventually.
Yeah, they have to go somewhere.
And then people say, okay, let's pack them on an island, or let's shoot them all in the head. And I go, again, those are neat ideas, but I have this guy getting out tomorrow. I can't do that. I'll go to prison for the rest of my life if I do that. So will you. So that's not an answer. It's a neat way to stop the conversation and not have to think about it anymore.
Right.
But that's kind of my whole thing. And again, I don't want to beat everybody up over the head with it, but we got to do better.
Yeah.
Because this is in your backyard. There are thousands of sex offenders that you don't know about, most of them in your immediate vicinity. And the problem isn't going away. And we got to do better.
Hey guys, I want to offer you something that is a personal touch, something special that I can share with you to help you grow and develop along this journey in this path as a defender. And what I'm offering is a monthly live call that you can participate in. And we're going to be talking about the 4 areas that I believe all defenders of life should be strong in. And those are physical fitness, emotional fitness, spiritual fitness, and training. So if you're interested in learning about those things and developing yourself throughout that journey, I'm here to help you. And I want my paid subscribers to have that personal touch of getting to talk with me one-on-one in this group call and sharing with others and encouraging others along this path. So if you'd like to get in on those calls, go to defenders-live.com, become a paid subscriber. I cannot wait to see you there. And thank you so much for your support of Defenders Live.
And that's kind of why I'm here today, is to talk about kind of some of the aspects of how to do that and what we're looking for versus the van pulling up outside and stuff like that.
Yeah, I want to talk about that and maybe along the lines too of sex trafficking. I know that's something that's been in the news more recently. And I'm not sure most people really understand what that actually looks like. Could you help us with that? Because I think the depictions that we have in our minds might be a little off. I'm not sure, but I'm interested to learn about what that really looks like in real life.
Yeah, so a typical sex trafficking case, I can just give you an anonymized version. This is real, but I obviously won't give names or locations or anything. But what a typical sex trafficking case looks like is, so there were 3 juvenile kids, all females. I think they were like 15, 16, around that age. And they go to the mall together. And they're hanging out at the mall. And a guy in his 20s, late 20s, shows up, walks up to them, and they're suspicious, but he says, "Hey, weird thing. I got this like $500 gift card I won from a radio station, and I don't know how to spend it. I'm supposed to spend it at this mall. And it was one of those credit card, use anywhere kind of preloaded things. And this is all fake, obviously, but they don't know. I'm trying to spend this, but I don't even know what to spend $500 on. Do you guys want anything? Do you want me to do your nails or something? Whatever. Like, you can have it." And again, you might think this is naive, but you're a 15, 16-year-old kid and somebody comes up and says, "I got $500 that I'll spend on you today, no strings attached." You're like, "Oh, all right. We're just going to ditch this guy later. Who cares?" Security guards everywhere, people everywhere. And so they do. So throughout the day, he spends some money on them, some money on him. And at the end of the day, what he's actually doing is watching them, and he's figuring out who they are. And he's trying to figure out the easiest victim. And at the end of the day, one of them at 16 had a car and drove home. The other one got picked up by parents. And then the third one was taking the bus. You don't take the bus unless you got parents that are both working and busy and you don't have the money for your own car or something, right? So there's an in. And so he gets to talking to this girl while she's waiting for the bus, and she's saying, "Yeah, things are good." And he spent all day with just having a relationship,
building rapport. Yeah.
Yep. Building rapport. So now it's, she tells him, "Yeah, I have, things are kind of rough with my parents right now. There's some stuff they don't know about. They're super, super religious, and they don't know that I lost my virginity outside of marriage. And if they found out, they would disown me, is what she's thinking." Mm-hmm. And of course, he's the kindest man in the universe. So he's like, "Hey, you know what? You don't have to sit here waiting for the bus. I'll give you a ride home. Like, I promise I'll give you a ride home. Like, nothing." Okay. So he gives her a ride home. Now, a lot of people might be thinking this is where the assault happens. Oh, no. He would get caught if he did that. He's not stupid. So he drives home, but what he does on the way home is he gets her phone number and says, "Hey, you seem to have a lot on your mind. I don't know if I got the answers, but I can listen. And so if you ever want to talk, just let me know." Well, he already knows she's not going to talk to her parents about hard stuff. She just said that. She's scared of her parents. She's scared of their reaction and what she thinks it's going to be. She's scared of most of the authority in her life judging her. And so she texts this guy for months. So over the next 6 months, they're texting back and forth secretly. And she knows her parents would be mad about her texting a guy in his 20s. But she's already used to keeping secrets from her parents. He knows this. And so he builds this rapport, and over that 6 months, it builds up to the point where he's, hey, do you want to come to a party? And treats her like an adult. Do you want to come to this adult party with a bunch of 20-year-olds and stuff and college students that are hanging out? Sure. Comes, gets drunk, hangs out, all that stuff, building this rapport. And then at some point in that, after about 6 months, he's, hey, they built a relationship to where she's texting pictures of herself naked and things like that. And he's reciprocating. But now he has leverage on her. And then one day it turns into, hey, I need you to come to this party. And then they go to the party and he says, hey, you're going to strip at this party. And she's like, excuse me? Absolutely not. He says, yeah, remember all those pictures I have of you? If you don't, I'm going to text those to your parents and tell them about you and what you're doing and all your secrets I know.
Wow.
But I don't want to be a bad guy. I just need you. All you got to do is take your clothes off. I've already seen you naked. Like, you just take your clothes off real quick. It'll be done. You'll make some money. I'll give you some money for this. Congratulations. You're now being sex trafficked. And that's one example, but you can see how long-term and how patient that can be. Now, does it happen short-term where people just...
That was my next question. Yeah.
It does. Super rare. We're talking less than 1% of the problem.
Really?
By most statistics. Yep. Super, super rare. And the reason is those guys get caught. Who, Laura, if I told you to go kidnap someone right now, I mean, how would you do it without getting caught? Would you just pull up to the first playground you saw and grab a kid? No, because you're going to get caught, right? So what you do, and what those people often still do, even if they are doing snatch and grabs, is they're going after drug abusers. They're going after homeless. They're going after people already prostitution, people who no one will miss.
Yeah.
Except someone who's not going to listen, not going to call 911, and no one's going to listen to anyways, because that's smart. So if a van pulled up and kidnapped a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 8-year-old in a good neighborhood, do you think that would make the news?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think as a kidnapper, you want that to make the news immediately?
No.
Now, does it happen?
Yeah.
It does. But it's incredibly rare.
Who's paying the kid, the 20-year-old guy? This is what I don't get, is I don't understand where the money's coming from and how can he invest that much time into a victim? Like, where's his cut? What does this look like money-wise? You know what I'm saying?
Well, right. So that might end up in prostitution, probably. That might end up in a house full of kids living somewhere who are all prostitute. It can, a lot of times it's prostitution, right? And so that's where this guy is now a pimp. He's making the money.
They just blackmail them, basically. They build rapport and then blackmail them, and then they have them, and that's in the story.
And now, and what feeds into that, and again, people always see these victims and they go, well, why don't they just leave, right? Why don't they just walk away? They don't, because their life is ruined. Right. Everyone who would be supportive of them, they're afraid of, because if their parents found out, if anyone found out, do you think that person's ever going to have a normal life? Right. Who's going to marry that kid who has been raped 400 times and is a heroin addict? So you get the idea, like they have sort of deselected themselves in their minds from ever having a normal life. And this is the only way they'll ever make money and survive day to day. And it's survival mode. And if you can get a victim thinking I need to get through the next 15 minutes of my life without dying, that person can't plan.
And then that
a year or two down the road,
the next recruiter, probably.
It can be, absolutely. And so this stuff does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I want to throw out there is that the manipulation tactic is by far the more likely route for this. And if you Google it, you'll find the stats pretty much everywhere. In general, if you are waiting for the van to pull up outside the playground and snatch the kid, again, that does happen. Mm-hmm. That's by far not the bigger problem that we have to look for. So the top 3, and this is from 2021 Polaris study, and everybody has their different studies, but it's very, very similar data across the board for sex trafficking, especially for child sex trafficking. The top 3 recruiters for sex trafficking were a family member or caregiver,
an
intimate partner, and then employer.
What?
Yeah, again, it ain't the van pulling up outside, right? It's because, again, and I ask people this as a thought experiment in some of the classes I teach, which is, Laura, if I asked you to go take a picture of a kid, a 5-year-old, if I asked you to take a picture of a 5-year-old, a selfie with a 5-year-old as a scavenger hunt right now, as fast as you possibly could, would you A, find some stranger on the street, grab them and take a selfie with them? Or B, would you go to someone you already know and say, hey, I know this is super weird, but I got to take a selfie with you for the scavenger hunt. Are you cool with it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know why we imagine predators are any dumber. Like, they know they're going to get caught. So why would they go for a stranger?
Okay, all right. So now we got to get into the brass tacks of how to spot this, because it becomes, in my mind, even more dangerous knowing that information. I mean, that is probably why these people get away with it, is because the complacency of thinking that this is only going to happen if a stranger's involved, and nobody I know would ever do that kind of thing. Like this is earth-shattering information, honestly, to a lot of people, I'm sure. Because it's like all of a sudden my heckles are coming up, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute now. Okay, if this is fact, then I need to be able to know what the patterns, what the warning signs are, what to look for, and how can my kids know what kind of relationship can I develop with my kids so that they actually would come to me. Or if something was kind of weird, and their red flag went up, the first thing they would think of is to come to me, like setting up an environment where that's the thing to do. Those 100%. Are two questions. But so, yeah, let's go down that, because I can only imagine all the parents watching feeling like me right now going, okay, we got to arm ourselves up with some new tools here. What are those new tools?
Great questions. And so, boy, we could talk for like 3 hours just on those questions, but I'll try to honor everybody's time and make it succinct. First off, right off the bat, there are no silver bullets. There are no easy answers, which is why this has been a problem forever. And I continue to have a job and sadly will until I probably retire. Time is on, if you're a hidden, if you're an unknown predator, time is on your side. Now, granted, you have motivations and stuff, but you have time to wear people down. And the first time someone finds out, or the way I describe it is, and this is really, really common interviewing sex offenders, is a thread, right? Every now and then they'll slip up. And a lot of these guys are what we used to call psychopaths, and behind closed doors we still do, right? But antisocial behavioral traits and things like that. And they don't really understand how other people think. They've gotten to fake it. They're really good at faking it. They know the answers, they can hide, but every now and then they'll slip up. And in spending years and years and years in treatment with sex offenders and out in the field doing interviews and watching them surveillance and stuff, they'll say things every now and then that are just weird. Like, all women like to be controlled. That'll just slip out of their mouth one day. Oh yeah, women just like being controlled. Now, if your best friend in the world, a guy that you've trusted your entire life, said that one day, and then, even if you called him on it and said, wow, it was a really weird thing. What do you mean? He said, oh, I was just kidding. I was, whatever. We are pre-programmed as social animals to let that stuff go and just think, man, that guy must have had a really weird day or something. Maybe I misunderstood him or something like that. Yeah, we let that stuff go. But over time, if you notice those little trends, and it's really hard, the biggest asset for predators is using our pro-social instincts against us, using stuff we are hardwired to do to each other: forgiveness, helpfulness,
being
making
nice.
excuses for people, right? Being nice. And they're experts at navigating that and leveraging that to get what they want long term. And this is why, after allegations come out or after the facts come out, every victim ever, has the same thought process in my experience, which is, how did I miss all of these signs? Now that I'm looking back, it's so obvious. I'm seeing sign after sign. And I go, yes, the reason you missed those signs is because we all would have missed those signs, because that's what we do 1,000 times a day with everyone else who's normal. We all say weird things when we haven't had enough coffee. We all do odd things. We all have some weird ideas about the world that we don't voice because we know people think they're weird, but every now and then they come out, and then somebody's like, wow, I believe in aliens, and everyone's like, oh, okay, well, maybe somewhere, but you think they're here? We all have that stuff. Okay. Sex offenders and predators are no different. And so it's not easy, but the key is to notice when those things are happening and record it if you can, right? Write it down. Keep a journal is one of the more powerful things you can do. Sounds silly, but like, hey, this is just this weird thing this person did. Because you won't catch it at the time. They're going to be really spaced apart. But, after like a year, if you sit down and look at all those things together, you might go, wow, none of those things make any sense. Like, why? Yeah, there's something weird here, and I don't entirely trust this person. And it doesn't mean that person's a sex offender necessarily or a predator, but that pattern recognition, right, long term is a lot easier if you have that recording. Another way to do it is outside. eyes, right? So a lot of times it's easier for other people who aren't invested in the relationship like you are to see those patterns. So guess what offenders do? They isolate the crap out of you and kids, right? That's one of the main issues to look for is isolation, where suddenly you realize you don't have those friends around you. Other things to look for are compromising strong personal values. So if you had like a really strong core value and then you find yourself or a friend suddenly just doing a 180 for no explanation, with this new relationship they're in, sudden spaciness, numbness, especially in kids. So you'll see a drop in grades, right, all of a sudden, and some of that's adolescence, but pay attention to that stuff. Sudden existential thoughts, especially young kids. If a kid starts questioning the meaning of life all of a sudden as like a 10-year-old, that's not normal. Something has happened to that kid. Fear or shame about a subject, like we just talked about that girl, that case. If someone has a deep, dark secret, and this is the problem, is you're not necessarily going to know, but if someone just won't approach a subject, right, they just get weird about it and say, something happened, I don't want to talk about it. Or
there's something there, probably.
There's something there, right? And that's leverage for a predator, frankly, if they figure it out. Or even if they don't, they know there's something there and they'll try to. Generally speaking, as a hypothetical predator, right, what I'm looking for is somebody who is willing to compromise their values and feels selfish discussing needs or wants, right? They're more invested in the people around them than they are themselves, and they don't have
low
that
self-worth then.
core. Right.
Yeah.
And so drug abuse, things like that are pre-baked. You're like, yep, that person already has self-worth issues. Great. That's my door in. If that person has been victimized before, they've got self-worth.
They're more easily manipulated, right? Isn't that that's what's happening here, is manipulation of the highest degree.
Highly likely to be real. If you have been a victim before, that is one of the biggest red flags for you, or vulnerabilities for you being victimized in the future. And so on top of all that, as you mentioned, having a good relationship with your kids. And the problem is you ask any parent, do you have a good relationship with their kid? Of course they're going to say yes. It's crap. They're going to say yes. Yeah. But that's kind of the point, is, do you really? Think back to when you were a kid.
Right.
Did you tell your parents everything? If you really screwed up, you did heroin at a party and then crashed your family car on the way home, what do you think your parents' reaction would be? Would it be bailing you out of jail and being like, we gotta, there's going to be consequences, but I love you and we're going to get through tonight and I'm going to support you, but there's going to be consequences? Or would they be like, what are you doing? And so this is a hard thing to swallow, is that, again, we like to go punitive, and there's a time for that, but that doesn't build a stronger relationship, right? If you think you're going to raise your kids through fear alone, ain't going to work. We got to have the support. And I strongly urge people to try to have this sort of relationship. And this is something they're going to have to figure out on their own how to do and assess, where your kid could do something unthinkably awful and you would do your best to have some sort of relationship with that kid and support them in whatever way you could. And they may not like it, but some sort of support. And ideally start this early enough to where the kid knows that when they screw up, right? It's just, if the kid drops a glass of milk on the carpet, that sucks. Do you want to teach your kid that that's the end of the universe, and the carpet is more important than them? Right. Or do you want to teach your kid, okay, now we got to clean it up and you're going to help and you're going to do it. And that, and then it'll be fine. And I'm not mad about it. And things happen. I screw up too. Right. But that's tough. And especially if you're the sort of parent who has 3 jobs and is exhausted and has nothing left in your emotional bank at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to do this unless you're a superhero. So now we're to the real core, which is, how do you be a good parent and how do you prevent a lot of this stuff? You be a good person yourself. You start working on this stuff and trying to be as healthy as you possibly can, because kids, you can give a kid a 15-minute lecture on how to be, but they're paying attention to your behavior 24/7. They're little sponges. That's how they work. If you haven't had kids before, man, they're like little meth addicts, right? They're figuring everything out on their own. 24/7.
And you can't hide anything from them.
You cannot hide anything. You might think they might not tell you, but they know.
Right. They know. And they know when your language and your actions aren't congruent.
Yep. Because survival for them is entirely based on you and you alone as a parent. So you better believe you're the most important thing in their life, and they're paying attention to you. And so again, that comes down to, I see this a lot with parents where they think, I can have a conversation on the phone with an earshot of my kid, but just because they're watching TV, they're not paying attention. Yes, they are. They're listening to everything, including the tone of your voice. subconsciously, if not consciously, they know what's going on. They're listening to the words. And any parent who's had this, their kid will suddenly say, what does this mean? And they'll say a word that's embarrassing, and you're like, oh, how did you hear that? Well, that's how that happens, guys.
Right.
So again, you have to work on yourself first. Then you can start to have this relationship, or frankly, it's almost impossible. And so you could tell I'm passionate about this.
I love it
because I see these same cases again and again and again. And so a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking self-improvement is selfish. If I work on myself as a mom of 3 kids, single mom working 3 jobs, whatever, me taking any extra time to work on myself. No, I got to feed the kids. I got to take care of them. I got to do all this stuff. Yes. But as long as you're keeping your kids alive at the end of the day and healthy, it's not selfish to work on yourself and do what you can to make yourself a better person as an example for your kids. And again, I see it in just about every case I work. So I cannot stress the importance of that.
Wow.
So there's some protective factors, and they're not easy. Nowhere in there was like some silver bullet. Oh, just
so are you saying if you want your kids to be more open and more vulnerable with you, come to you and be more resilient, then you might consider as a parent building that vulnerability, openness, and resilience in yourself first.
Yep. And being the kind of person who can even do that for your kids and who your kids would see. I once had a child psychologist give a presentation, and he said, parenting is easy. It only takes 2 things. You have to be there, you have to be present, right? Available, and you have to be reliable. And the whole audience is sitting there going, but then he expounded on it and said, those 2 things sound simple, but being there isn't easy when you have a job. Being there emotionally available isn't, because you could be there physically and not be there emotionally in the slightest bit. You're just checked out at the end of the day because you're exhausted. Being reliable sounds easy. Oh, I take care of my kids. But do you ever, when you're tired, tell your kid, yeah, we'll do that later, because the kid's going to forget about it.
And they probably don't actually forget about it. They probably just give up on it.
Not at all. What you've just taught your kid is that
I can think of times when I was a kid where I got let down, like, oh, they said they were going to do that, but then they never did. And I remember those times.
They might have forgot.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you make that a core part of your relationship with anybody, including that kid, they'd be a fool to take you at your word. And all you've done is taught them that adults lie out of convenience sometimes. So now what's that going to mean when that person runs into a predator? Well, lying's normal. Lying's convenient. Lying, or this person's going to present as this, this ideal of what this kid, they know the kid wants, right? A lot of predators will try to make the kid feel like an adult. Try to respect the kid on the surface and say, I need help with this thing. And one of the other things I tell people is like, hey, teach your kids early that adults do not need their help. If the neighbor is like, hey, I need help moving this bookshelf, or I need help doing this thing on my computer, maybe, but they can ask another adult. And it's inappropriate usually for them to be asking a kid to do that. And it's not your problem as a kid to solve that. But again, crediting on our pro-social instincts, what do we teach our kids? What is what do the kids programs teach our kids? Share, always help out. Don't talk to strangers, right? Don't talk to strangers. But I'm not your stranger, right? Your neighbor isn't your stranger. The family member isn't your stranger.
That's what's so alarming about this, Ross. That is what is so alarming. Teaching kids don't talk to strangers when sometimes the biggest predators are people that are right within your sphere, which is
so more sophisticated than that. What I would tell people is strangers aren't the problem. I mean, they are, but again, not the whole. The more likely vector for this is a family member or someone this kid knows and trusts already and has that built-in trust. And so you have to be more sophisticated. We sell our kids short a lot of times, but once they're like 8, 9, 10, they're learning how to navigate the world and conversations. And so don't sell them short. We can teach them that, hey, adults don't need your help. If an adult is ever asking, except for me, right? If an adult is ever asking for your help with something, I want you to just tell me, just let me know. And just let me know. Yeah. We have to start teaching them to pay attention, because predators are going to make it, they're purposely going to make sure that you're not around when this happens. Yeah. So you've either already taught your kid to navigate this on their own or not. It's very unlikely that you're going to be there. And if you are there, it's going to be of the sort where they ask something that they know the kid wants in front of you so that you're the bad guy if you say no. Oh, I was going to take the kids out to ice cream after this. Is that okay? And they'll do it right in front of you, because they know that if you say no, now you're the bad guy. And they might not have gotten away with it, but they have a foot in the door now where that kid now knows, again, they're playing the They're playing the good guy to get what they want.
Right.
They're chipping away at that relationship. So you might feel like you won, but you didn't win you won the battle, not the war. And so all of this is to say that you can see how hard this is. And I can't give you a bulletproof, simple profile of a sex offender or a predator. But what I can do is tell you to when someone says something weird, note it and write it down somewhere, or talk to somebody about it who can run it. You can run it past them. Teach your kids to do the same thing. Teach your kids that, like, hey, if someone ever says something that you don't understand, ask me, bring it to me, and create the relationship where they're going to do that. Another big thing is teaching your kids that, hey, I will always have your back. If you call me at 2 a.m. from that sleepover and you want to come home, I am not going to ask you why. I am not going to lecture you on, it's 2 a.m. I'm not going to be like, well, why? Why do you want to come home? Nope. I'm no questions asked, going to get in the car and come get you. And a lot of parents would see that as enabling weakness, right? They'd be like, oh, that is sensitivity. That kid's not going to learn how to be an adult. There are other better ways to teach that lesson. Yeah. And what you're actually teaching your kid is to question their own feelings. And is that something you want to do to a kid and have them grow up learning that if they feel uncomfortable in a date or a situation or anything going forward, I'm probably wrong. Don't do that stuff. So there's a lot of little pieces to this, but broadly, it's treating your own children more like adults as they age into that, and probably before you're ready to, frankly, because how else are they going to learn? Yeah. And they're not going to get it right away, right? I'm not saying let your kids do whatever the heck they want, but if your kid has zero agency in their life and they never get to decide a dang thing, is it really the end of the world to let your kid decide what they wear to church? Would it be mildly embarrassing if they picked a weird outfit? Yeah. Who cares? They're still going to church. They're still listening to you. They're still doing all the things. And now you've let them at least have some agency. And guess what? If they go to church and people make fun of them, they'll probably learn on their own that maybe they should put a little more thought into it. A lot of life lessons are not told to kids. They are, again, and this comes up in our training community for a lot of things, is we steer people, we guide people towards these lessons, and then we're there as a resource if they need us. And a lot of this is uncomfortable for parents, talking about sex, talking about all this stuff. But would you rather your kid do it on their own or do it when you're around? One last thing on that, which is one of the more powerful things you can ever teach your kids, and this comes from a Columbia University study on stuff, but on what leads to rape in college and things like that. But one of the biggest protective factors is having a goal for sex.
A goal?
If I ask a goal, right? If I ask the average adult, what do you want out of sex? You're going to get a variety of answers. I want to feel good. I want kids. I want to strengthen my relationship with someone, whatever, right? If someone says my goal is just to have sex, is just to become, I'm a virgin, I don't want to be a virgin, that's embarrassing, I feel stupid, I need to get that out of the way, that is a problem. And that is one of the number one identifiers of someone who is going to be at risk for rape in college and later on, is that they don't have a goal, or their goal is to get it out of the way as fast as possible because they don't have any other association, like emotional connection or anything else with that goal. And so you might think that's baked into marriage, like we just need to teach kids not to have sex till marriage. Hey, I hate to tell you this, they still do. Even if you tell them not to, they still do it. I don't know if you remember being a kid, but you don't always listen to everything your parents say. Yeah. And so you think your kid does. Everyone's out there is like, my kid's good. Maybe. Yeah. Remember when you were a kid? Yeah. So my point is, it would be better, and this is embarrassing conversation, but one of the more powerful things you can do once your kid is old enough to start, and I hate to tell you, with females, puberty happens sooner than you think it does. And this is a question you're going to have to start talking to them about sooner than you are going to be comfortable. And I see parents do it all the time where they think, oh, I don't want to talk about that because they're not ready.
Yeah, I doubt that's the issue.
How do you know? And do you really want to wait until after they've already been ready for 3 years and doing it and figuring it out on their own to have the conversation? Like, what's the problem? They know the internet exists. They know sex exists. They're talking, even if the internet didn't exist back when I was a kid.
Well, it's really that the parents aren't ready, I think, is what it is.
Right. It still happens on the schoolyard. None of this is a mystery. So talk about it. Put it in context, because as a trainer, if you put something in context that they then experience, they get more out of it than if they'd experience it with zero context and then later you try to sort through it.
Right.
Ask your kids when you think they're ready, hey, what do you think sex is for? And they're probably not going to have an answer. They're the point isn't to get them to give you a dissertation on it. The point is to plant or even have a conversation. Good for you. They're probably not going to want to talk to their parents about this. So you scored. You don't have to be uncomfortable. But you have planted the seed that there is a purpose to sex, and they should have an answer that they're going to think about on their own and start to think about that and construct one. And that's the point, is to plant the seed. So a lot of this it's not mind-blowing stuff necessarily, but it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I would also say
some of it is a little mind-blowing, honestly, for me.
Well, another protective measure while I'm mentioning it is don't use, if you're uncomfortable talking about something, find someone who is, or get comfortable, because who else is going to talk to your kids?
Right.
Yeah, I know it's uncomfortable, but and teach your kids actual names of things. So one thing that predators do is they will try to take the edge off of sex by coming up with toy names for things, body parts, things like that. Acts, right? Certain acts are called different things. And I don't want to gross everybody out, but my brain is full of these comments from years and years and years. But, an example is a sex offender who got oral sex from a kid would refer to that as talking to that part of his body, because now that takes the edge off. Oh, do you want to talk to, just talk to so-and-so. So, wow. Right.
That is sick.
It is. And this is stuff, unfortunately, I've had to listen to a lot in treatment.
How are you so sane, Ross? I don't understand.
There's the thing. You think I'm sane. I go out and camp a lot on my own, and I look at the wilderness, and I drink a good beer around a campfire.
Things you can't unhear and things you can't unsee. And I just don't understand how a person can.
It's not been easy. And I will say there is that aspect of it. So to end my thought real quick.
Sorry about that. I interrupted.
Teach your kids real names for things. And this is going to be deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But teach your kids the parts of their own body and what they're called, and get them used to referring to it. Because otherwise, that again it seems weird. I promise you, it's a protective measure. Mm-hmm. So, and then on the other side of that, your question of how I remain sane, I will just point out that if you are in this field, it's like a swimming pool full of toxic waste or radiation. You can only spend so long there. I don't care how strong you are, and it will sneak up on you. So if you are involved in this stuff, get used to the idea that you're going to have to step away at some point. Probably multiple times. And at some point, you're just going to need to call it quits, or you're going to go crazy. And so that has already happened to me. I had to step out of the field 5 years ago after doing it for a decade and get one step removed from it, where I'm still involved, but I'm not the guy anymore digging through the halfway house and fighting people and taking them to jail nearly as often as I was. But I had to do that because I got to a point where I hated the world and everyone in it, and I was pretty sure everyone was awful, and that made me do my job worse, and it also destroyed me, mentally. So be prepared for that. And that's any job. Like if you work as a nurse or EMT or anything with people who are hurt, you can only do it for so long. So pay attention to that mental health aspect. And I have a whole other class on that I teach as well. But
that could be a whole other show right there.
That's the gist of it, is know when to step back. And the problem is, what do we teach when we're highly motivated people, right? We look at that as failure. I can't step back because I'm doing the job, and that's weakness and everything else.
Did you have to learn to reframe that?
Very much.
Yeah.
And I hated it. It was not pretty. I will not pretend that I did it perfectly and that I sat there and thought through it all the way. I hated it. It was ugly. It was a multiple year process. Some awful, awful stuff had to happen in the process to make me realize how short my fuse was and how low my emotional tank was. And
I don't know any human that can be in toxic sludge all the time and it not affect them in some way. So, yeah. Like I said at the beginning, I can't even fathom the things you've seen or heard or the kinds of people you've been around. I just so appreciate that you would be dedicated to take the time to teach classes around this so that the general public can at least gain an awareness and hopefully a better perspective and some practical ideas of what to do and how to defend against this, how to prevent this in the first place, if it's even possible to do so. And it's a very, very deep, murky pond, it sounds like.
It is.
Is there anything that we missed? I know we missed a lot, actually, but
we did. Sorry.
No.
I get excited going down rabbit holes, and
it's okay. I'm all game for it. I just wonder, was there anything big that you wanted to speak on that I didn't ask you about?
Yeah, one last thing is for a lot of people, college or having your 18-year-old kid, daughter, for a lot of people, go out into the world is a scary part of life. And yes, hopefully you have equipped them well with what they're going to need to navigate that by that point. But I would throw out there that a lot of times sexual assault is treated like a legal problem for a lot of people, because it is, right? So colleges, employers all have policies on it. A lot of them have classes, mandatory classes on it. Hey, consent is this. You have to get 100% consent. You have to do all these things. Because that's a lawyer coming up with that to protect that university, protect that organization, that employer. That doesn't work. Not to actually protect the individuals. You know what happens when you teach kids? Almost every university has a mandatory consent class these days. And all that does, when you look at the stats, is it doesn't reduce assaults. It reduces reporting of assaults. Because now kids think, well, I got told and this happened to me and after the fact, and now I'm embarrassed. Or it motivates them to, believe it or not think about what happened to them as a rape or an assault, because it's uncomfortable, right? It's now you're a victim. Now you're all these things. So don't rely. So if you see a program out there, right, that's great. That covers their butts. It does not do anything for your kid. It's a social problem. And we have to start treating that in a social way. And the only people equipped to do that are friends and family who are doing this and having these tough conversations. And so one little aspect I'll throw out there is just to give you an idea how complex this is, right? We teach consent from that legal aspect as verbal consent, right? 100% verbal consent. Do you want to have sex with me? How many times have you done that in your life?
As
an adult, hypothetical.
Right.
Now you want a kid who's never done it to do that?
Right.
We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
You know what they do? If you interview them in an anonymous way, what they talk about is, for females especially, proximity is consent, right? If I sat down on the bed next to you, that's a signal that I want to make out with you. And if I pull away from you, that's a signal that, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. And guess what happens when you ask the males of that same age group what they interpret pulling away as? I'm not doing it good enough. She's not enjoying herself. I need to do it harder and better.
You're kidding. Wow.
So that's a recipe for disaster right there,
Definitely.
right? So again, lecturing people is not the answer. Having a class is not the answer. We got to do it to check the box, and sure, they might pick up something useful, but that's not how humans behave. And we have to step back from that legal aspect and realize what we've been talking about this whole time, which is, hey, you parents out there, this is your problem. And guess what? No school program, no church program, any organization is going to solve this for you. And you have a very simple choice in my experience, which is you can figure it out for your kids, or they're going to figure it out on their own, and it isn't going to be pretty. So my ending kind of thing for people is, take this seriously. If it's uncomfortable, good. That means you're probably doing the right thing. Figure it out.
That's how we know.
That's how you know. Is it uncomfortable? Yeah, it's probably okay. If your kids hate it, yeah, they can hate it. But this is what we got to do. And all this is backed by research and a whole lot of stuff. So I'm throwing this out there. This isn't just my opinion and stuff, but it is also my experience. And I would leave you with one final quote, which you'll probably recognize from Gavin de Becker, The Gift of Fear, right? Which is, niceness is a decision, right? A strategy of social interaction. It's not a character trait. And all the time we teach ourselves and others that, oh, that's a nice person. Nice. I hate to tell you, nice people do not exist. Good people act nice sometimes. Bad people act nice sometimes. It is not a way to categorize people. So pay attention to behavior. And if something is counter to the behavior you're used to or what your expectation for that person is, don't dismiss it. They might have had a bad day. They might not have had enough coffee, but note it, write it down. And if it never happens again, it never happens again. No big deal. But if you find yourself doing that every couple of weeks, take a closer look at that. So that's kind of my final statement, my parting shots there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know I think we could do an entire show just on one section of what we covered today. I mean, this goes deep, Ross. It really does. And you have so much expertise in this area and experience. Like, you are so uniquely qualified to speak on this. It's just really, really amazing. And you've been on the show before. I think it was either last year or the year before. I can't remember. The years start running together as I get older. I know what's going on with that. But if people want to learn more about you, and I think you have classes for what you're speaking of through Citizens Defense Research, people can go to citizensdefenseresearch.com, and you guys are on Facebook as well. Can you speak to what you guys have coming up this year that people can look forward to?
Yeah, so I teach. My teaching has been a little bit spotty because of some big positive changes in my personal life going on.
That's great.
Really good stuff. But because of that, I kind of pulled back from teaching over the last year. So I'm a little bit hard to find at the moment on the schedule. I had to cancel a bunch of stuff and figure things out, but all for good reasons.
That's good.
So I'm not going anywhere. You will see me around. This year, pretty much the only thing I'm teaching is actually going to be at the Active Self-Protection Conference in Manhattan, Kansas, coming up in September. And you can Google and figure out the dates for that. But I will be teaching a class on this very subject there. And a whole bunch of other stuff. We're going to talk about unknown predators and known predators. And I've taught that for the last 2 years, and it's always a great time. It's really interactive. So you actually get to try to manipulate your fellow class members in a nice way, not in a way that traumatizes anyone. Yeah, but you get to try to plant a seed of an idea or figure something out. And so it's a fun little exercise to try to think like a predator and recognize when other people are doing things to you. And it's interesting because every year I do it, people miss things that they thought they would have picked up on. And that's the whole point, is how hard it is to catch this stuff when you're trying to pay attention to 50,000 other things.
Right.
And so come on down if you want. It's coming up in September, but that's where I'll be this year. And then next year, just go to citizensdefenseresearch.com or the Facebook page, and you will see me around here and there, and hopefully more after December this year. So
that's awesome.
Very cool.
Well, you already gave me your parting thoughts. So all I can say at this point, Ross, is I just can't thank you enough for taking the time. I can only imagine other parents that are watching this right now or listening to it, really rethinking some things. And there's a lot of things that I myself am reconsidering. So this is definitely making my wheels turn. So I can only imagine what it's doing to my audience. So
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Work me out of a job. Prove me wrong. If you don't agree with anything I said, great. Prove me wrong. But I would love it if I woke up tomorrow and the whole problem was solved, and you said, "Hey, Ross, everybody figured it out, and you don't ever have to do this again." And I'd go, "You know what? I'll go do something else. I don't care. I'd love it."
Yeah.
So, appreciate it.
If you guys have comments or questions, put those in the chat, in the comments, because I can make sure and ask Ross that, or it might end up being a show idea for another show with Ross if you guys are really interested in one particular thing. So really good information, how to stay safe, how to keep our kids safe. That's really what it's about at the end of the day, and one of the most important things, for us as parents. So thanks again, Ross. Hope to see you again in the future.
Absolutely. Take care.